Okay, so to kick us off tonight, I want to, of course, start with a land acknowledgement. WIMDI is largely run on the land of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. I live and work here. Many of our volunteers live and work here, and we're very grateful to be able to do so. As part of WIMDI's commitment to moving reconciliation forward, part of what we do is we collect donations on behalf of a local Indigenous nonprofit called the Pacific Association for First Nations Women, the PAFNW. You may already have donated to their cause when you bought a ticket. If so, wonderful. If not, that's also okay. We love to have you here anyways. And if this is the first time you're hearing about it and you would like to, there's a QR code over there that you can use to donate, or just go to wimdi.com/donate. And all of the proceeds from those donations go to their education fund for Indigenous women and girls. I also want to thank our wonderful sponsors tonight, Spare. They've lent us this space and been very helpful in getting this whole thing going. Friends, excited to get started on this panel. Part of the reason I wanted to do this panel is because so often in my coaching practice, and heck, even in my former working life, I would be, put in front of these executives, or I have clients who are put in front of these executives, and then you're filled with terror and you go, I don't know how to interact with these people. They're almost some sort of alien species. And so, there's this high pressure moment. You want to impress them and you're not entirely sure how. And so I wanted to convene this panel today to talk a little bit about how you work effectively with these very senior folks in the C-suite, or even folks even a little below that, so that all of y'all can, whenever the next time you're put in front of one of those people, just absolutely blow their socks off, because that's what I want for everybody in this room. So we've got an amazing panel of 4 folks who have lots of experience either being in those shoes or working with folks in those shoes. And I'm going to have them sort of go down the line this way and introduce themselves, because you don't want to hear me read their bios. Let's have them tell it instead. Go ahead.
Thanks, Holly. Hi, everyone. My name is Diana Vong. My background is as a CPA. So I started out on the accounting side of things. And then more recently, I was actually the CFO for YVR. So I worked at the Vancouver Airport Authority for almost 17 years. So I spent the first 10 years as a director of finance, and then the last 7 years as CFO. So about a year ago, though, I made a big, bold decision to leave and go off on my own. And really, that was about me taking on having the freedom of controlling my time and flexibility, but also about learning different sectors, different industries, and just being able to explore. So now I've developed an a la carte career. I call it a la carte because I can be choosy about what I'm doing and who I'm working with. And so I am doing a mixture of things. I am a fractional CFO for an AI company, and I also do some advisory work for some executives for different organizations. In addition to that, I also am a coach in training, actually. So I am pursuing a coaching certification as well. Outside of my work life, I am a mom to 2 kids. I have a 14-year-old daughter, a 12-year-old son. What I like to do in my spare time, I love dance. I grew up as a dancer, and so I still dance to this day. And so that's kind of like my time. So
Diana, we have a lot in common. We have to hang out more.
Oh,
Between
yeah.
the coaching and the dancing.
Yeah,
we gotta talk.
let's talk for sure. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. Happy to share more later. Allison,
Thanks.
over to you.
Hi, I'm Alison Lickley. I'm a management consultant. I work at a firm called Cascadia Partners. I started my career, I have a chemistry degree, and then I actually pursued a career as a performing singer-songwriter for about 5 years as like my career, not just a hobby. Realized after a lot of being an independent singer-songwriter, it's a bit of a tough go, and decided to switch gears. So I went back to school and got my MBA. And that's when I got into consulting. So it was about 12 years ago now. I started at KPMG in Montreal. And then 5 years in, we moved out here to Vancouver. And I've been with Cascadia since then. And so I get to work with a lot of executives in my job. It's a big part of it. They're often who hires us. We're presenting to them and making sure that we're delivering value. And it's a lot of fun. Outside of work, I have a 4-year-old daughter, and I'm clearly pregnant with another daughter due in November. And we moved to Whistler in January, so I come down to Vancouver every week for a day, and then I'm enjoying settling into mountain town living.
Nice. Have you ever written any songs about your work? Like, have you transitioned? Yeah, exactly. And can we hear them if you have?
I did write like a chemistry song years ago.
Yeah, you did. Nice. You got a SoundCloud or something? Okay, that's the after party.
I don't sing or dance, so I don't know if I fit in this group. My name's Monique. So I'm actually a mechanical engineer. I was talking to Agnes earlier today saying I started where I was the only girl in my physics 12 class, and that's been sort of my career ever since. I worked for a large international consulting firm for the first dozen years of my career, just kind of working up through getting my professional engineering designation and moving into sort of engineering management. I then moved over to BC Hydro. I spent a number of years there doing project management for large infrastructure projects. That's probably where I spent most of my time being terrified of the executive. And then about 5 years ago, I moved to actually quite a small consulting firm that does project management, construction management, engineering, sort of full project delivery for large construction projects. And now I'm sort of in the executive team, so it was a little bit of a flip for me. So it's been interesting being on the other side of the fence. I am, outside of work, I am also a mother of 2 daughters. They're 12 and 14. They're lovely. One of them is a dancer, so maybe she can hang out with you guys. The other one's a soccer player, and I'm not an athlete either, so I don't know. I love gardening. That's my thing. So flowers are my jam.
I was going to say, what do you garden? It's mostly flowers?
Flowers, yes.
What's been your best flower this year?
The dahlias, for sure.
The dahlias,
They are,
okay.
I have purple dahlias that are about this big right now. I actually was trying to show them a picture of them to my aunt the other day, and I was like, I feel like you can't tell how big they are, so I held a volleyball next to one of them, and they were the same size.
Oh my
So
God.
I was like, there you go. That's the, yeah.
Okay, we have to talk. My garden looks like a crime scene. Like, I tried to grow like, what do you call them? Snapdragons?
Yeah.
And they snapped over in the wind, and then they started growing sideways with new snapdragons.
Yeah,
growing out of them.
yeah.
Like, it's Frankenstein-y. It's not good. So we need to chat about that too. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Shauna Wilton. My day job is VP of Operations at the P&E. So I feel like I'm maybe the most whimsical person on this panel right now. I've been there for about 2 years. In that role, I basically run all the fun operations, so fair, playland, and then a bunch of different functional areas like food and beverage, public safety, guest experience. But throughout my career, I've actually sort of have had the perfect career that I could not have architected looking forward if I tried, because it's been so varied. But I started in the petrochemical industry in an ethylene refinery, doing HR actually. I went to university to be an accountant. I have a business degree, but discovered I really hated accounting, but really loved business and people. So I fell into HR. And from petrochemicals, went to healthcare, consumer packaged goods, high tech, and then aviation. So I actually worked in helicopter services globally for a number of years, but then decided I just wanted to stay close to home in Vancouver, and actually went to the city of Vancouver as a senior leader there in Parks and Recreation before I worked with Allison at Cascadia, doing some management consulting over the pandemic, and then ultimately the P&E. My other day job is I'm the president of British Columbia Golf, which is the amateur sport organization for golf in BC, which feels like a secondary full-time job. So I'm very, very active in the golf world. I'm happy to talk about that as well at any point. I was sitting here thinking, what are my hobbies? Oh my God. I box. So I took up boxing to actually cross-train for golf. So there was a purpose, but it actually turned out to be the most amazing, stress relief, skill development, fun, ever. So there you go.
Amazing.
That's
and
me.
so are there people here who golf? I'm curious to see if we've got any golfers. You've been golfing? Okay, listen, you know what? It's not like a test. You don't have to be this good at golf to put your hand up. Anybody golfed ever? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Look, a bunch of aspiring golfers in the room, or people who got scared off and didn't put their hands up the first time.
Nice.
How about boxers? Anybody doing Cross-training? Yeah? Okay, great. Are you cross-training for golf or something else?
Exactly.
As you do.
I never knew that this was the primary combination. It's sort of like soybeans and
They're
corn.
very
You gotta put them together.
complementary sports, actually. Yes.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. When I get into golf, I'll have to start boxing.
Yes.
Okay, well, thanks y'all for telling us a little bit about yourselves. It's so funny. We've already met and talked, and we've read your bios. We've posted your bios on the internet, and I'm still learning new things about you, even now in this moment. And I know who to talk to for my gardening, golf, whistler, and dance/coaching needs. Okay, so I want to start off with kind of what I think is sort of the big question at the heart of interacting well with execs, which is, what the hell do they care about? What do they want? What are they interested in? What matters to them? In your experience, either as somebody who's done it or as somebody who's interacted with them a lot. What can you tell us about that? Anybody who feels moved to speak can go first.
I can go if you want. I always think, I have a mantra both with my own boss, I report directly to a CEO, and with my staff that report to me of like, no surprises. This is like critical information sharing. I don't want to ever have to have them hear something or I hear something that I should have heard from a staff member first. So that's first. And then the sort of subcategories of that are risk management issues. So anything that's going to be a risk to the organization, like reputationally, ability to deliver on our business, resources that are maybe critical, that are, short supply, a key resource is resigning, those sorts of things. That's the stuff that I think matter the most. Oh, and media relations would be the other one. If you're ever going to click open the internet and read about your organization, you definitely want to float that one first. One thing I always teach my staff is like, what might be the most important thing to them in that moment is not always the most important thing to me. And so having that lens of like, what is really critical to that person, the level above you, is a very key skill, I think, to develop in your positions.
Great. Love it. Anyone else have something to add?
I would say like I demystify executives. Like, they're not aliens, they're people. And I think it's helpful to get to know executives as people and as individuals as well, right? Just to be able to have the conversations in the hallway, or, like, I think it's harder when it's virtual these days, like when people work from home, but when you are in the same space as someone, like, I think it's helpful to go up. I have to say that like when I became CFO, like it suddenly became a little bit lonely as well, right? Like I used to go to the lunchroom and it would be normal for me to be in the lunchroom. And then now it's like, oh, like Diana's in the lunchroom, right? Like it's just like, you still want to have like colleagues and friends at work, and to be able to have conversations and jam about what are you watching on Netflix, right? But, to Shauna's point, like the important things to CEOs in particular, like they're the ultimate person that's in charge of the mission of the organization. Like, what are you there? What are they set out to do? And so it's important to understand what their goals are and what are they trying to strive, and what is the strategic alignment that you have with the organization's goals. So just being able to understand that and to translate that into, that's the work. This is how my work is actually helping this individual. And so being able to signal when, things are going off the tracks, or, like you might want to look out for this, like this is what I'm seeing. I think that's always helpful, right? So going at it with like a curious mentality and being able to share, like, this is what I'm seeing, what are you seeing? And just being able to hear from them and wanting to learn from them as well.
I think the only thing I was thinking the same thing as you is like, risk to reputation, risk to like the direction of the business. But the other thing is opportunity. I think a lot of times we worry that, we just they're only worried about risks and damage control, but they also want to know if there's strategic opportunity in the industry. If you know something's going on in the industry around competitors of yours, I come at it from a consulting lens. So we're always watching what's happening with our owners, with big projects, and with other consultants. And so you can be quite opportunistic. So they also want to know that if we can have sometimes those windows for strategic opportunity are very short, and you got to be quick with them. And so that information has to get up fast.
Yeah, I think that's a really good call out. I don't know if this is something that y'all have noticed, but I certainly notice this in my coaching practice, especially when I'm working with folks who come from a technical background like so many of us do. It's like we're trained risk spotters. We're really good at making sure that our I's are dotted, our T's are crossed, and nobody's going to die. A great thing to have in an engineer, right? But that opportunity spotting thing is often a skill we have to cultivate and get really good at. But it's really important the higher you go in the organization, because you can't, because I know so much about sports, I'll use this metaphor. You can't win a game on defense alone, I guess. I've been told. I don't really know. But it's true. My sport is dancing. It's a very different thing. But yeah, that's something that I think is really important as you move up, to be able to get good at spotting where opportunity is and not just always messaging risk, because then you become the person that brings the money into the organization, not the person who stops the fun in the organization. Okay, how have you found, or what tips and tricks have you found that have been helpful in communicating effectively with executives?
I've found that you build a story that's often like the mid-level, and then you refine down to the most essential stuff that an executive needs to know. And so it's often very short and sweet. And you start by being really clear about the objective of this encounter. I'm looking for a decision on this, or I'm looking for validation of this direction. And you're always kind of ready and strong on the details if they want to go there, but you really just give them like the essential high level.
Yeah. So really boiled down, background detail in your pocket.
Yeah.
And tell them why you're there.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I think the call to action is important. So what they always want to know, exactly what you said. Am I being asked to make a decision? Am I being asked, like, what are you asking from me? I want to know that first and foremost, because otherwise you read, and then you get to the end, and then you're realizing what you're being asked for. Oh, and then you got to read again, right? So like, tell me what you want. And I think what I've learned over some time is not to be afraid that my emails are going to be, or particularly in written communication where you can't get that interaction, is don't be afraid that you're being too direct. That your emails are going to be perceived as rude if you're just being like, this is what I need, because that's exactly what they want. Just tell me what you need. So all the flowery stuff and all the background information about why I need this information, it doesn't matter. Just tell me what you need. So I think that's something I've been coaching some of my team too, is like, don't worry that you're going to come across as being rude. You just be really direct.
If anyone's done insights, like the insights colors, red is like be brief, be bright, be gone, something like that. I want that like tattooed on my forehead, because that's like how I live life. And so, yeah, I agree. Like when you're trying to process so much information, I actually really appreciate when people just like get to the point too. The other thing I'd maybe add on to that is like learning to read the room. Like I do this with my boss all the time. There's times I know she's open to things, and then I can tell there's times when she is not. And so trying to like pitch ideas or, have a conversation that she's not ready for is just a waste of time. So being able to kind of have like that EQ too, to just sort of do a little temperature check before you launch in as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
The Humphrey group does a lot of coaching and stuff like that. And they have the thing called the leader script. And it's actually like a structured way to how to format emails, but you can use it in written. And they do it like you have your grabber, then you have your ask, then you have like 2 or 3 points, and then you have your call to action. And so it kind of helps you if you're new to it, is if you take an email and then be like, wait a minute, and try and transpose it into this format, it does help. It gives you that rhythm that you learn to how to ask for things very succinctly.
Yeah, I've also seen, I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but there's like a US military of all things, standard of communication by email, where it's very similar. It's like the thing you want up top, 3 bullet points, your email's over pretty much, right? And so, yeah, those I've seen those formats, and they've been really helpful as well to be able to edit your email down to something that's manageable. Good. Okay. What have you found effective at establishing your, take your pick, credibility, gravitas, executive presence, when you're in meetings in front of executives?
When I was at BC Hydro, so a little story. When I was at BC Hydro and I was a project manager, there's a very robust system for managing your key metrics, your overall project health, your budget, your schedule, your, safety incidents, all that kind of stuff. And it was in the system, and it automatically had a red, yellow, green trackers on them. If any of yours went red, no matter what the reason was, every month you got flagged to something called the Project Accountability Meeting. And what they would do is they would sit, super fun.
Yeah.
It was like the shit that you have nightmares about at night. So you would go up to the 18th floor of the tower in Burnaby, and they have a horseshoe-shaped boardroom table, and all the executives of the company sit there for the full day. They sit there for like 8 hours. And they parade in project manager after project manager after project manager. And the way they have it set is that it's in this horseshoe, and then you sit right here at the front of it.
Oh my God.
Behind you is this giant screen that is projecting your KPIs with your red, with what you've written, and you sit there and you're like, and so you have to answer for like, what's happened. And they would always kind of stage, like they'd bring in like 5 or 6 PMs ahead of time so that you would sit there in the back of the room ready. So as soon as that person was out, you were in. So you always had the opportunity to sit there and watch a few people before you. And the thing that struck me all the time was it didn't matter. I mean, it kind of matters like how you present yourself, what you're wearing, but not totally. Lots of people were super nervous. Also kind of didn't really matter. What stood out was how prepared they were. If you're prepared and you know your content, you know exactly what you need to say, you know your stuff, the executive immediately just kind of like, you could see them, their shoulders kind of go down, they look at what's next, because they can tell you know what you're talking about. They can tell that you've got things under control. The credibility is instantly there, regardless of whether you're like shaking and you're like sitting on your hands and whatever. But the people who kind of came up and were like, and they didn't really know, and they were kind of spinning around their story, you could see their heads snap up. And they'd be like, they would go at them because they could tell they weren't ready. So for me, just being prepared, it's very obvious when someone's prepared. You can tell in an instant if they are or if they aren't. I think it was like watching this amazing little social situation, but yeah, experiment of people.
I love how they
It's
set
wild.
this up to be like maximally intimidating.
Oh,
like,
it's wild.
Right up to the like 18th floor, even being part of
Wild.
it. I was like, wow, these people
Yeah.
are geniuses.
Slow ride up.
Yeah, that's right. Just like, and every elevator button in red to remind you of your failures or
and
something, right?
You're in an elevator packed with other PMs who are all like, what did you do? Like, oh no.
Yeah. But I think your point is so well placed, right? Because so often the question, whatever the subject of the meeting is, so often the question that is fundamentally being asked is like, do you got this? Can I trust you? Yes. If yes, we're fine. If not, I'm going to get involved now, and neither of us want that. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, if you can show you've got it in hand, that's going to lead to a much shorter meeting.
Kind of goes back to your first question of what do CEOs care about? They care that their team knows what they're doing, that they have a competent team that has things under control. That's another thing they care about.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like, I'd be curious to hear from y'all. Like, I'm always, in coaching senior leaders, you don't manage to coach a senior leader without at some point talking about like the sheer deluge of work coming at them, right? Whether you're talking about work-life balance or whether you're talking about how to prioritize, how to make decisions, how to balance, like, it's just always part of the conversation. And so like, I'd be curious if any of y'all in the room, like, can y'all give the audience a sense of scale about that? Like just how much stuff, decisions, etc., is coming at these folks on any given moment or day or week.
Well, I mean, I can speak to my experience when I was at YVR. Like it was like we were managing basically like 6 different lines of business within the organization. Any given year was between $200 and $700 million in construction, $200 to $300 million in operating expenses. Like I was getting probably a couple hundred emails a day just from outside partners, internal. We had a lot of different competing objectives. So you are processing information very quickly. And so time is your most precious resource. And which is why, the communications, like being right up front, leading with headlines is the way to go. Absolutely. Like I always say like, okay, this is not math homework. I don't need to see your work. Yeah. Just tell me the answer and the so what. Okay, here's the answer, but what is the implication of it? Yeah. But it is a lot of information that comes at you. I would say that confidence in communicating is really important, right? So being prepared and being able to confidently articulate your idea, your thought, your insights. I think that's really helpful to be able to demonstrate your gravitas, right? So I think people get really nervous and they might know their stuff, but it doesn't actually come out. And so that's where, like if you are nervous about it, like it's helpful to be able to practice with someone or have discussions. You can even record yourself. It was interesting because when I first became an executive, we had to go through media training. And so I had to be recorded. It was like an awful experience. Like I was dreading doing it, but it makes you realize the little things that you do, right? Like even when you're talking, if you're looking up in certain directions, you might look like you don't know what you're talking about. If you look in another direction, you look like you're pensive. And so even being able to work through what that looks like, how often you look down, how often you look people in the eyes, that is a big part of someone coming to the conclusion that you're confident in what you're talking about or you're not. Yeah. So it is really helpful to be able to watch yourself. And I think with Teams and Zoom nowadays, like you are seeing yourself more, but you're not quite watching yourself unless you record it and watch it over again.
Yeah, as somebody whose little meetup group that could started a YouTube channel 5 years ago, let me tell you, you don't know what you look like until you filmed 1,000 videos. You really don't. And it is revealing. Sometimes in good ways and a lot of times in ways where you're like, I do have to figure out where to look.
Yes.
Like it's all those little things that go into creating the experience that somebody has of you. Yeah. Neat. Okay. Can you all share some do's and don'ts of communicating or working with skip levels? So not your boss, but the boss one level up. Should you do it? How should you do it? When is it a good idea? When is it the worst idea on the planet? Talk us through the perils and advantages of communicating with skip levels. Any one of y'all.
I say I don't have a level above a skip level. So
thinking of the past.
I know. So I'm thinking about it. I think it depends what you're trying to get from it. So, like if you're going into it because you want to undermine your boss, not a good idea. If you're there to, I'm trying to think of a good way to put this, like portray your interest in further career development or get yourself on the radar in a really positive way, then I think it can be very, very effective because it shows your interest. It perhaps gives you some exposure that you wouldn't necessarily ordinarily have. I actually like it when folks like 2 levels below me do that with me as an opportunity for me to kind of figure out like what's important to them, what's keeping them up at night, and just the opportunity to kind of see the business from their eyes as well. I actually have that built into sort of my engagement plan for my staff. I go do sessions with them out where they work so I can also see what it is that they're doing. But I initiate that as opposed to them initiating it with me. So it's a slightly different take on the skip level.
Have you ever had anybody initiate it with you and like positively in a way that you liked?
That's a great question. Not recently.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Anybody in this lineup, if anyone has had somebody do that and would share how they did that, that would be interesting too. But
I think you can be transparent with your direct boss and leverage them and say, hey, like I've got this idea. I'd really love to talk to the VP about it if that's the skip level, and I'd love to share like what do you think about the way that I'm thinking on this, and even just leverage them to like role play and see if they would be able to provide perspective on what that skip level boss how they would react, right? And so like I had that situation where a manager wanted to talk to me about something, but they totally talked to their director and they worked it out and it was all good. But I have to say like the direct boss needs to be confident in and be able to trust you that you're not going to undermine them. And, like that's not the intention of the conversation.
Yeah. And it can be like helpful to have, if you're having that kind of conversation, when you're talking to your direct boss, you can sort of say, here's how I imagine this could make both of us look good. And this is what I'd like to say about how you've contributed to the idea.
Yeah.
Like those are positive signals that you're not an assassin with a knife.
Yes.
Transparency is key. That's a good point.
Yeah. Sure. Well, I think that's just it, is that skip level communication in both directions only works if everybody's aware that it's happening. That's where people get caught off guard. And, when somebody said earlier about you don't want to be surprised. The worst thing is to be surprised when you find out that one of your team members has skipped you, or that's a tough one. In our organization, we have staff that work in our office, but their managers are in Calgary. And so sometimes they'll just walk down the hallway and be like, I've got an issue, can I talk to you? And I'm a skip level above them. Of course, like I can help you solve problems. That's not an issue. I think one of the things that for anybody who has teams below them, I'm currently operating in a situation where my boss is skip leveling down to my teams, and it's extraordinarily disruptive. And so it's sort of more like a warning of where skip level communication goes very wrong. We get so many objectives and so many things that we are being told we have to have our teams doing. They have to be doing all these different things, but we're one level closer to them, and we know what they can and cannot handle in any given amount of time. We know how to prioritize all the asks that are coming from above, and we shield a lot of those things, or at least I do. So I shield my team from a lot of the requests that come from above, because I know them better and I know how I can manage and achieve what we need to achieve. But then sometimes my boss will skip level down and ask, what's the status of this? And my team's like, what are you talking about? And then it just blows everything up. How come I didn't communicate this to them? He's frustrated that these things aren't happening. And so it's where skipping can be very, very detrimental to relationships within the organization, of just your own credibility as a leader even. So it can undermine kind of the way that the system works. So I guess it's the transparency of skip is very important in both directions.
In both directions, yeah.
Yes.
If you could have a wish list, I'll put you on the spot a little bit. So if you don't have an answer, that's totally okay. But if you could have a wish list for maybe not your specific team, but a mystery team under 2 levels underneath you, or 1 level underneath you, who's getting skipped down, how do you wish they would handle the skip level who's a bit hands on the wheel?
Yeah, I think it's I think the request would be absolutely, like there is a respect thing of listen, have the conversation, but don't do anything. And then go and talk to your direct manager and be like, hey, I was off, what do you think? What should we do? Right? Like, just have a conversation with your actual manager about it before. I think what happens often is when somebody more senior than your boss comes and tells you to do something, you're like, yeah, okay. And like you run and do it, right?
Because cut everything else off the list, get that on number
the
1.
president comes and says, go do this, you go do that. And it's like, I'm just asking, like, just like wait 5 minutes, phone me first, and then maybe don't do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay, great. What strategies have you found have been helpful for stakeholder engagement when you're dealing with a situation where it's not just one decision maker, but there's actually lots and lots of folks involved in getting something going or getting something decided?
Yeah, we deal with, I think we all deal with a lot of this, but it's often a big part of the projects I'm on. I think really understanding who has power and influence and then where they're standing on the issue is so important. And that often means needing to have like one-on-ones with all the people who are going to be able to influence the outcome. So if you're going to a board meeting or to present in front of an executive team, you really want to know where everyone's at in support of that idea, and if they actually have the ear of like the top decision maker or not. So that power and influence thing. So like stakeholder mapping and kind of having the lay of the land there is pretty important.
I've sometimes had, when I've been working with clients, where they sort of know they're supposed to do the thing you're describing, but they almost get worried, like, am I allowed to take up time in these folks' calendars? They're more senior than me. Like, will that be welcome? What's your perspective on that?
I think it's nice. People like having the option to be engaged earlier, to like have a chance to provide their opinion. So often, like if you have this decision that you're putting forward and you've got some stuff, that you'll be presenting, at least giving them the chance. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Want to make sure, I've brought your perspective into this, that kind of thing. And if they don't have time, that's fine. But even just being asked, I think, makes them realize their input was valued, and puts you in a better position.
Yeah, and it gives them the ability to have the thing that gets proposed turn out the way they'd like it.
Yeah, exactly. And so when they give you input, that becomes a little more delicate because you can end up with different views on things, but finding ways to try and reflect parts of at least what they've shared as their input, whether it's like changing certain wording, so that they see like a little bit of their own imprint on the on the final decision.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar just in terms of really understanding what's important to your stakeholders, like asking that question first. So then you can sort of start to tailor some of those communications. And sometimes it can change the outcome of the decision if you've actually not really fully understood what is the importance of certain topics to people. So that one for sure. The other one I would say is relationship building. So I really hate it when people engage with me on things just when they want something, like if they have not done the work up front to kind of relationship build first. It's just, I think it helps with also that transparency and then, you know, being able to communicate more around what the needs are when you've got sort of a steady relationship first.
Yeah, and I like that concept of relationship building, and it calls back to what you were talking about earlier, like they're human beings, talk to them, you know what I mean? And also when you're dealing with somebody who we talked earlier about, like their most valuable commodity is time, what's a good way to relationship build with somebody ahead of time?
I think always leading with curiosity, right? Like I'd love to know more about you. Like, what do you like to do outside of work? Like just the regular kind of small talk, but just like truly being curious about who they are, being curious about what's important to them, and also seeking them for advice. Like people love to give advice. And often, and so if you go, right? So we love to give advice. But if you're going to, you know, a stakeholder and, you know, like I'm working on this project, I think this has impact to you and your team. How do you see this? What's the impact to you? And what's your advice for me? And more often than not, they'll make time because that means you respect them, you want to hear their opinion, and you care about how this impacts them. So just approaching it in that way, I think, you know, generally most people would be happy to answer.
I think to your point, well, both your point too, it's about doing it early enough. You know that whatever you're working on is going to end up in a board meeting. Those don't just show up out of nowhere. So you've had lots of time. You know it's coming. So don't show up to them the day before and be like, so meetings tomorrow. How do you feel about all that? Right? Like you should have talked to them for the last 3, 6, 9 months, however long this project's going on. So if the first time you show up at their doors the day before the board meeting, like, yeah, you're probably not going to have the best experience.
Which still happens all the time, but it'd be so nice to get ahead of that. Yeah.
Right?
As the CFO of the organization, it was like, can you sign here? I'm like, no. No, yeah. My line was always, your disorganization is not my emergency. Yes. Right? So like think it through, plan it out, but just that consideration of a stakeholder map and just really thinking about what you're working on. I always encourage it's back to line of sight, right? Like when you tend to work on something, you tend to be a bit 2D, and you need to start thinking about whatever you're working on in 3D. Think about it from the different angles. You know, like how might this be perceived differently? Like just turn the whole thing around and really consider like who else that it can impact.
Well, and it sounds like as well, it's almost 4D, like with that time element, right? Like when do people need to know about this is really key. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So I've got Allison, you're making eye contact with me because I think, you know, I've got a good question coming for all of you, but I know you're going to have something good to say about this. So how do you suss out appetite for change, and like organizational readiness in particular? If you're somebody, I think probably there's lots of folks in this room who have brilliant ideas and who are change makers, and you're somebody who wants to push those kinds of things forward in an organization, or you spot an opportunity. How do you know when the right moment is to pounce with your idea? Or to gently slide it in, depending on what's required.
Well, my context is a little bit different because we often get hired when the senior leaders have decided that they're ready, and they're ready to put some funds to invest in consultants to move an idea forward. So that's one of the things I love, that like we're coming in where change readiness at the leadership level is often there. And then we have to figure out change readiness at the organizational level, which is a totally different thing.
What do you notice at the organizational level that tells you there's readiness or there's not readiness? Because you can see a really big difference, right, between the folks who've said yes and signed on the dotted line and then the ones underneath who are going, we're doing what now?
Yeah, like there's no such thing as like communicating too much typically. And so if you're having enough conversations and enough engagement with people across the organization, you sense when there's like resistance and I mean, we do a lot of stakeholder mathing again to try and figure out like where do we need to get people on board? How do we get their supervisors or their directors on board and make sure that they're hearing it from people that they actually report to directly? That can be really important. But yes, it can be like a project in itself. Just to
just to map it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're kind of, it sounds like you're finding ways to like leverage pre-existing trust, like trusting relationships, and then also leveraging reporting relationships. Like, not that you want everyone to come in and like, you must do it because I'm your boss, but there's an aspect of that.
Yeah, there's way more incentive, or knowing that your boss and your boss's boss really support this idea and why, like having such clear messaging makes a big difference for people getting on board.
Other folks, things to say on organizational readiness for change?
Well, I would say I'm a big like testing the water person. Like, I tend to just throw ideas out on one-on-ones with people and say, I'm thinking about this. What's your reaction to that? How do you feel about that? What are your thoughts on that? And it gives people a chance to kind of like roll around in it a bit. And then I'll just leave it there for a bit. Like, I'll get sort of their initial reaction. And then depending on if it was a positive one or a negative one, that can sort of dictate how long it is before I wait to bring it up again. One thing I learned actually working in municipal government is what is a terrible idea today might be the most brilliant idea 6 months from now. And just timing is absolutely everything. So it's not this moment of time of like, oh, the organization isn't ready for this change or whatever. It's like, it's just not ready right now. And so it's like not losing track of those things, but kind of, cataloging them somewhere so that you can roll them out again when there is a time. And coupled to that, I also learned there's like no such thing as wasting a good crisis. Like, sometimes an idea that actually didn't seem to have legs because everything was awesome, in reaction to something that is now off the rails, again, gives you this case for change that is just night and day different. And it's actually a great skill to cultivate instead of like spinning in the crisis of going, oh, wait, this is a great opportunity to look at this thing we were thinking about before. What do you think now? And suddenly it's just a no-brainer. So yeah.
Yeah, I sometimes have this. I've had this with people who have reported to me where I can sort of watch them managing me in real time. And I've done this to managers too, of course, right? But like, you sort of have that moment where something's going wrong and then they sort of go, how about, and then they pick the biggest pain you're having in this moment. And they're like, how about if we could solve that with old idea that I loved and you hated? And you're like, okay. You get your yes. And it can be, really effective as long as you can sort of keep an eye. If you've got a project in the back burner, keep an eye on like, how does this connect with the current pain points, right? Or what's perceived as the big opportunities even.
There's like a really small thing I wanted to change 2 years ago, and like I couldn't get any traction on it at all. And like my rationale was it would be more efficient, more effective, and it just made sense to me. What we were currently doing made no sense to me, but it was sort of like how the organization had always done things. And then we had something go off the rails recently, and all of a sudden that idea was now amazing. And like it just took all my willpower to not go, do you remember 2 years ago? I thought this would be amazing. So yes, I just had to be patient.
You get to say it here.
Yeah. Yes. You're all my witnesses. Yeah.
Did you at least get credit for the idea?
No, I don't need that. I just wanted the change. I didn't need any of the credit, but yeah.
I like you to also have credit, but I hear you.
I think what's also kind of interesting too to think about, what I think a lot of people don't always think about, is that change usually requires some investment of time and money. And so recognizing where you are in the fiscal cycle, so know where your company's fiscal cycle is, and usually a quarter or two before the end of the fiscal is when ops is thinking about like, are we going to start investing some time and energy into this new initiative, or where are we allocating kind of our overhead dollars this year? That's a really good time to be like, hey, thought that maybe this year we might be able to spend a little bit of time and money on this. It may not make a difference, but it doesn't hurt to try and pounce at that time.
Yeah, and I'll be keen, Diana, to hear your thoughts on this, but I always found it's pretty good to make friends with mid-level accountants because if you get them, like I used to have in my office, like an accountant that always worked late. I always worked late. We'd have a little chit chat, and it's like, I could just sit there and be like, okay, so when is the budget meeting? When do you get your submissions? I want to move this forward. who do I talk to?
Where
and just
is
like get the lay of the
where's-
land.
Yeah, like where's the underspend?
Yeah, that's it.
Where can we
right?
leverage? How can we be creative?
Yeah. Where do we have budget left over now?
Yeah.
Who could I convince to say yes to this,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yes. Always be friends with finance. Absolutely.
besties with finance. Yeah. Such a hack. Also, they're lovely. And when they get near the
Not
top, they get
scary.
lonely, right? Like all of us.
That's
So
That's right.
okay. Folks, we're gonna turn I was gonna say microphone, but just the talking loudly over to you in a minute for some of y'all's questions. But before we do, I just want to ask one final question to this group, which is, what do you think is the most under-discussed thing, not related to communication or soft skills, because those get talked a lot. I asked these folks this question already. I've got a bugbear about communication and soft skills, but what's the most under-discussed thing that you think people need to know about working with execs?
I fixated on the soft skills and the communication because I'm like, I do think those two things are so important. Maybe one I would throw on there that's kind of related is just EQ. It goes back to my earlier comment about being really in tune to reading the room and knowing when is the right time to kind of be able to engage in certain things.
And okay, so I'll piggyback on that because I would also say it's also sort of what Dana was talking about is that executives are humans too. They're real people. A lot of them are also very interested in growing their careers. So they're not only just focused on the business. That's not the only thing they care about. Most of them are also very much looking forward to their own growth. Some people have families, dependents, they've got things going on in their life. Time is the most precious thing in the world. So being respectful of their time is probably one of the best things that you can do. I had an EIT chase me down the other day into the elevator lobby because he had like one more question he had to ask me before I was going home. And it was some question that was like absolutely not fire. Could have dealt with it tomorrow. I'm trying to leave to get home to get to my kids. And I just remember thinking like, read the room. Now is not the time. This is not a good way to make an impression. So I think it's like remembering that they're humans too, and they need be respectful, I guess, of their time like you would with anybody else.
You said something really interesting there though, which is that you don't like end up in the C-suite by accident. Like you're ambitious, right? And I think a lot of folks in this room, like, let's be honest, it's a Thursday night, you're here, you're ambitious, right? Otherwise you'd be at home being like, I don't need to build my career. And I think, we were talking earlier about this idea of like going and asking for advice and how quite often people love to talk and give advice and be that person, but that it's also really fun when you can see that spark that lives in you in somebody else, right? And so I think quite often women get that message that we're supposed to like downplay our ambition. I certainly felt like that a ton. I've been told that as well at various times in my career. And I think in those moments when you're in a room with somebody who gets that and who lives that, it's probably a good idea to share that. I'm just having this little moment as you've said that. So thanks for that.
I would say like when I was an executive, what I really appreciated was when someone would come and talk to me and tell me about something, but they're not putting the monkey on my back. Like and it goes back to, having the confidence that you've got it under control. So it's great for me to know that you've done this work, we've managed this risk, whatever it is, but you're not just punting it over to me purely because like I need to take it on. Like what I really appreciated was you come with solutions, you've already taken care of it, or Diana, I'm really stuck on this one spot. Can you help me work through it? So just being very deliberate about that, but just not just lobbing it over the fence and being like, okay, I'm going home now. And I'm stuck like trying to figure out like, okay, well, where do we go from here? Right. So like people like to say, hey, this is a risk. And I'm like, okay, great. So
What now?
what should we do? Right. So this is where I would use my coaching and ask questions back. Like, where do you see the options and how can we actually fix this? So that's one thing that I really appreciated when people would come talk to me.
Yeah, I think so often there's that like next set of questions that if you go and have that conversation, you kind of can anticipate coming. And if you can just answer them before you even get in the room, you're already winning, right? You're doing everybody a favor. Yeah. Okay, friends, let's open it up to y'all. Who's got questions they'd love to ask this wonderful group of dancers, golf players, and even executives?
I guess maybe I would just say, like, don't be afraid to ask follow-up questions, because I'm actually now thinking of where I've probably done that to my team before. And now I actually feel terrible if they didn't, like, if they went off confused and were like, oh, she didn't give me any context for what she meant by that. Like, I just, to the comment we were talking about, everyone gets so much email and there's so much going on all the time. I do feel like we're at this inflection point from a volume perspective right now of, like, we do just need to take a beat to be able to also be reminded at a senior level that, oh, I need a little bit more information, or did you mean this or that? Like, I would say, like, feel confident to just ask those questions. Pointed questions are probably more helpful, again, to kind of speed along the communication, but do it, because, like, going off in the wrong direction or spending a bunch of time being confused isn't helpful either. And I will also say, in addition to executives being humans, we also need coaching and development as well. So, like, I love feedback from my team of stuff like that. Like, you're not communicating clearly enough for what I need or whatever. So do that.
Everything you said, solved in one. Who's got another question?
Can I just add to that one?
Of course.
I think people have the misconception that because you're an executive, you know everything.
Uh-huh.
And so in that instance, like, maybe they don't know everything. Like, you're thinking that they've got all this context, but maybe that's all they have too. Or that's, like, it's just they're going so fast. So it's a time and volume thing where they might just be going so fast that they didn't even think that, like, they think you're living in their head, right? And so it could be a time factor, but it might be that they don't have all the answers. And so, maybe that is how you lead. By saying, I have some additional questions, but if you don't know the answer, like, I'm happy to go try to figure it out, right? Like giving that extra bit of, like, I'm happy to support you in kind of filling out the peripheral pieces that I need to be able to do this. So being able to ask, for sure, but just don't assume that just because they didn't say it, like, that they actually know it all.
Another piece that I'm thinking of, just as we're having this conversation, and this comes with an asterisk because sometimes it'll get you exactly where you need to go and other times a real disaster. But you may have, like, we talked earlier about the idea of, like, influencer mapping and kind of figuring out who knows what and who knows who and who's important. You might have access either through your boss or through other relationships to somebody that knows this person well and who understands the types of conversations that are going on at that level. And so sometimes you can kind of leverage that person that may not have as intensive a schedule or maybe easier to get time with to help you interpret and understand what this means. But you have to be careful that they're going to get that right. Because, again, you don't want to waste a bunch of time driving down the wrong road. I'm reminded of this, like, Silicon Valley was a TV show many years ago, and the CEO of the sort of Google-like company, he's making tea before he goes away on a trip for 3 weeks. And he pours honey into the tea. He notices that the honey container, which is shaped like a bear, is sticky because it's got honey all over it. And he's like, ugh, I hate this. And then as he's leaving, just as he's about to get on his jet, he says to his two, like, subordinates, the bear is sticky with honey. And then he gets on the jet and they're like, what? What do we do? And then you see them over the next several weeks be like, the bear is sticky with honey means we're ready and ripe for a new opportunity. And these are the things that we could propose, right? And then the other person is like, no, it means the lighting in the conference that we're about to throw is bad. And they come with, like, all these different things, including a live bear when he returns. And they were like, about that bear was sticky with honey thing. He's like, yeah, I noticed you guys never cleaned it. What's wrong with that? And they were like, oh, put away the bear, like. And so you don't want to end up in a bear is sticky with honey situation is what I'm trying to say. But sometimes that can be helpful if you play it right.
Someone told me once the definition of work-life balance is choice. When I worked in high tech, we used to talk about that a lot. And so I guess it does kind of depend on how you define it. Actually, Alice and I were talking earlier, like, now that I work in the events industry, I work like 7 days a week, and, like, I was at work on Saturday night. So then I was like, oh, what do you do about that? Like, but I golfed Friday afternoon. So, like, and to me, that's work-life balance. So I think it kind of depends what you value and what you choose and how you choose to spend your time. But I will say it's a challenge. Like, I feel insurmountable guilt all the time over my email inbox. And the fact that I have 5,000 emails in my inbox no matter what I do, because every day it punts out 30 days worth of emails. So it just sits at 5,000. So like I can't make any progress. So I feel like I've just become this triager of like, who am I answering? Who am I not? Like, what am I reading? What am I not reading? It's just mathematically, I think, impossible to process 5,000 emails. So like, I don't feel balanced when it comes to that stuff for sure, but I'm trying to define it in a different way that gives me some sense of peace.
I do think creating boundaries is important, and respecting those boundaries. I will be the first to say that I'm the first to violate my own boundaries sometimes, right? And that comes from guilt. It comes from like wanting to be able to answer my team member that's been waiting for an answer. So just making sure that you're clear on how you want to work, but also talking with your colleagues on how you're going to work together, right? So I have always been very open with my team about having kids, and that, hey, like, I need to sign off at 3 every day. I'll be back on at 7 once they've gone to bed. Like, this is when they were younger. And so I will answer you, but I just need the patience that I'm just not going to look at it between those hours. So being clear and upfront and transparent about like who you are and the challenges that you have in your life, then for them to be able to share like, hey, they've got kids too, or they're taking care of aging parents or whatever it is. I think the work that you do, you are humans working with other humans, and just it's so important to be able to treat each other that way, and to have the generosity to be able to consider like what the other person's going through. And so hopefully that's reciprocated. It's challenging sometimes because you just need to be able to deliver at some points, and you have to make some sacrifices. So balance to me, it's not like 50-50, right? It's not equal. It is about, recognizing that there are certain points of time where your balance looks slightly more work, and then there will be other times when you can choose to have some more personal time. So it's a mix for sure.
I get asked this question all the time, and I'm convinced there's no such thing as balance. But the only thing I ever say is that when your plate feels really full and it can't possibly take any more, something is going to fall off. Be intentional about what it is that falls off. Because if you're not, the really important things will fall off and you've now lost control. So be okay with things falling off, but be intentional about which ones they are. And that's all you can really do. And then sometimes it settles down and you can pick it all up, put it back on. But I think when you see people who really truly hit that burnout, it's because they've completely lost control. And it's of managing the, whatever you want to call it, the balance, the juggle, all the things. And sometimes that intentional letting things fall can be very, 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 very hard. But it's knowing that the things that are here are the things that absolutely have to be.
We talk a lot about lowering the bar and intentionally dropping balls.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the ticket.
Yeah, you have
to let yourself off the hook for the things that are not as essential, and you show up to the potluck with a box of cookies, and everyone's fine.
Yep. Your question, I don't know if this is something that you're thinking about, but it sparked a question in me that I think is like lurking behind the scenes so often when we think about these really senior level roles, which is like, is it worth it? And what's made it so? If the answer is yes. Because, every time I've attended panels like this, I've, read books, I've blah, 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 where, somebody asks the question that you've just asked around work-life balance. And as lovingly as possible, what I heard from y'all was not a rave. If you looked at my life, it's not a rave either, and I think that's really common, right? Like we talked about how time is the most valuable commodity. And, when you're at the top, there's no one else to call. It's you, at the end of the day, it's you, and you might be able to outsource that to somebody else, but vacation looks different than it looked before. Weekends look different than they looked before. Midnight sometimes looks different than it looked before. Right. And yet there's so many folks doing it. Is it worth it? And what makes it so?
I'm going to say yes as somebody who has asked that question quite critically several times in my career and then decided to take a step back as a result of like, I'm at a level where this is too consuming in my life. it's too stressful, it's too whatever. When I worked for the city of Vancouver and lived in Vancouver, like you could never get away from work. If I walked down the seawall, I was responsible for that brick and for that garbage and the fact that that flower bed was a mess. And like, so I didn't even have sort of the ability to go out in nature and enjoy it because like I was always at work. And so I left that role and I went into consulting actually very purposely because I thought I want to break from being everyone's boss and from always being on and always having to make all the decisions. And so I lasted 2 years and then I missed that so bad. I thought that is the work that I intrinsically find satisfying. Like I love leading and developing people and like seeing the change in the world and like just kind of having a big job. Like I don't love all the things that come with it, but I think it's like truer to kind of what I want to do. So I've done that like probably 3 times in my career where I got to a level and I was like, oh, I don't know. And then I dropped down for a bit. And every other time I kept going because there's just something intrinsically motivating about it that I figure out how to manage all the other stuff.
I like that you work for the PNE now because you can choose to go there or not as opposed to just the city streets, right?
And it's fun. Can I just tell you, like, if I'm having a bad day at the office now and it's summer, I can go to Playland and I watch like Casey Bear, our mascot, like have a moment with a 5-year-old. That's just the most heartwarming thing in the world. And it's like just such a really simple reminder of like why we're doing the work that we're doing. It's actually a very grueling, not place to work, but business to be in. And it's not like I only work for 2 weeks during the summer for fair, which is what all my friends and family think. It is a 12-month-a-year job, but yes, it is very different. Yeah.
I think that's actually also part of it too, though, is I bring my kids with me to events. Like I have to go to events after. So I'm on the steering committee for the Women's Infrastructure Network and we have quite a few events and we organize them. I bring them with me. Like it doesn't have to be a me and my career thing. I want them to be around it. I want them to see it. It's time for us to do it together. So I think that sometimes it's just thinking also a little bit creatively about how you can do both at the same time. I mean, you can't bring them into, board meetings, but like I bring them to work on their pro D days when I'm feeling like, oh, I should really be home with the girls. I bring them with me. They think it's fun. They like being around my office and then they talk to people and they see them around and like, they're old enough now that they're not like 3 years old running around the office. So that's nice that I have that. But I think sometimes it's also thinking a little creatively about how you can kind of get both done at the same time.
I mean, I made a big change a year ago for a reason. And I think that, there's different phases of your life as well, right? And so for me, I worked really hard and I built my career and I made some sacrifices. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Like I did have to make sacrifice in terms of time. I was really, I'm really lucky to have a husband that has a flexible career and doesn't have views of having traditional roles in the house so that he could take on more. He did most of the driving for the kids. But at the same time, like for me, I did reflect on, going back to being deliberate with what was on my plate, being deliberate with my time. And I got to a phase where what was important to me was to be there for the kids when they get home from school. And so I built an a la carte career so that I could, carve out some time between 3 and 5. I can work with clients that will accommodate and just, being cognizant of what is now important to me. So I went through a phase where, it was really important for me to develop my skill set and that experience. But it was that has actually now granted me the freedom to be able to do what I'm doing now. And so I don't regret it at all, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it to say that, as an executive, like you do have to make some sacrifices for sure.
I think that's really common, the thing you just said too, where like you do it for a season. It involves a huge expenditure of energy, time, yourself. And you get a lot out of it. And then later on you go, okay, it's time for a new challenge, and maybe a different schedule. Right. And I mean, I've made similar choices. Right. And there's things that I love about the running full out. And then there's things I love about the being able to control my schedule. I think there's something good in both. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was just gonna add to that. For me, it was also the realization of like how much of it was my own standard for myself versus what others were expecting of me. And I found that my standards were actually a little bit too high. And so back to, the lowering the bar, right? Like being okay at half-assing some parts of your life is okay. Maybe not the critical ones, but just being able to be generous with yourself, be nicer to yourself. And I went through this one coaching session, and I was being coached, and the coach said to me, she's like, okay, Diana, like tune into that voice in your head and listen to what you're saying to yourself. Would you ever say that to your friend or your sister or your colleague? And I was like, oh my God, I'm abusing myself. Right? But it's that as well. And so I think we do tend to just push ourselves that much harder. And so that also contributes to, how hard we're working oftentimes.
Yeah, and I don't know, Diana, if this is part of the story for you, but I know I see this in my own coaching where there's your own set of standards that come into play around that. And then there's quite often the sense that the bar, not just you've raised it higher, but that society has got it higher, or, the workplace has it higher for you as a woman or a person of color or a queer person, or insert intersectional identity here, right? Where when you kind of pile those on top of each other, it can be really hard to turn that down and become conscious of it, right? Because it's often been part of the story about how you got there. And so dismantling it is work that I'm avoiding doing with a coach.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you've totally touched on, something that I struggled with when I first got promoted to CFO. Like all the CFOs that came before me were all tall white males. And then, this was in 2017, 2018, when I got promoted. And it was a time when DEI was like at the very top of every single corporation's list, and where there's targets and measurements and all these things. And so I absolutely felt like I had to prove myself. Whereas I don't think like if I was a white male that went into that job, I think they would have, like everyone just assumes like, oh yeah, of course they can do that job.
Yeah, they're so tall, they can see the numbers better.
Right?
Obvious qualification.
There's more oxygen up there, I think, too, right?
So much clearer.
Yeah, they're closer to the light bulb. So yeah, that was definitely something that impacted like how I viewed myself in that role and my confidence in that role, and then subsequently like how hard I worked as well. Yep.
Thank you so much for coming tonight. I hope you've heard something tonight that you find useful. That's always my hope for you at WIMDI. And if not that, I hope you've met somebody that absolutely dazzled you. Thank you very much for all 4 of our amazing panelists. Can we get a big round of applause? Thank you all for giving us your time and your expertise. I know at so many points in my career, and even now, it's such a privilege to be able to hear from folks who have done it or folks who are still figuring it out like I am. Both of those have been just such amazing gifts to me over the course of my career. And I'm really grateful that you've taken the time tonight, especially given how much we talked about the time pressures, to come and share that with this room of wonderful people who I know will put it to good use as they build their career into, who knows, maybe the place where one day they're sitting on this panel in 10 to 20 years. We'll still be here. Not here specifically, all 4 of us tonight. We're going to go home next. But anyways, okay. Thank you so much, everybody. Amazing.